Amanda Grodman. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I am excited to talk with you a little bit about how you took your passions, which seem to be more of a different bent, and you kind of applied them to space. So tell us how you came to get involved with the work here at Aerospace and Innovation Academy and your interest in science.
Of course. So in middle school, I was really geared towards art, mainly towards visual arts, but I was also involved in music and writing, and science was never really like a sphere that I really considered. Even though throughout my life, I had pretty much enjoyed science. I enjoyed studying animals, viewing the composition of plants. I really enjoyed anatomy and just kind of all components of biology, but I really didn't see myself as a science kid, considering I had a lot of weaknesses in math and kind of analyzing problems. And so consequently, I kind of put that off to the side and I really started to focus on art, especially since it was what a lot of people knew me by, and it was how I kind of gained recognition within my own little sphere. So I became much better at writing, I think, especially throughout middle school, because I took a lot of writing classes and I was really involved in language arts. And consequently, I was able to write about more than just kind of creative stories. And I started to branch out, especially when interscholastic writing competitions, and I started applying myself in that field. And then last year, in the middle of 2021, I was approached by the AIA to start working on the children's book, which encompassed kind of all spheres of both space, science, writing, and art. And this was something I was really excited about because I started to be able to apply myself in art in kind of the also sciencey field. Simultaneously, I'd also really recognized how much I really liked biology. And after taking it freshman year of high school, and this also related to my experience in middle school where I took it in 6th grade, and I kind of also realized how I really enjoyed that part. But like I said, I really kind of put it on the back burner and I didn't recognize how much I really liked it. And I just kind of saw it as a natural trait. So after we started working on the book, I started to realize how much more I related to science and how much more it wasn't just about biology, but it was also about space, chemistry, and other sort of components that throughout my middle high school career, I came to learn and become familiar with. So then after publishing the book, I gained a lot of knowledge about space and art and writing and about being a leader within a group. And I think ultimately this led me to really flourish in both the science and art fields, which is why I'm currently the writer of the Let's Go to Space blogs, which are on the Aerospace and Innovation Academy website. And I guess that's just how I have been.
So that's a lot, right? So like you didn't see yourself in one way, right? We talk about that as like forming a science identity. And we know that really helping students recognize when they're younger what is out there and what they can be exposed to. You felt like you had some weaknesses, so you automatically assumed that that wasn't your gig, but you found a way to take what you did identify, as the artist and turn it into that. Let's talk a little bit about your book that you not only helped to write along with Finley, but you were certainly the major illustrator with that. So what were tell us a little bit about the information that's in the book and what the process was, like some challenges, difficulties.
So the Let's Go to Space book is supposed to be really inclusive in terms of all branches of science, specifically in aerospace. So we not only talk about the Falcon 9, but we also talk about the ISS and specific components and pieces of information that students and educators should know about these topics should they decide to either teach it or learn it. So we kind of go through the story of how the ISS came to be, the purpose, who's currently in the ISS, along with the Falcon 9 and methods of these vertical landings, which is how the rocket lands vertically. And in this, we kind of split into two groups originally of people who are going to be writing and contributing, and also people who are going to be drawing. But we eventually just decided to kind of split it into one group, considering that both of the topics really related to each other. And consequently, we were able to kind of diverge into different writing and art sectors, and we were able to corroborate all the information into one final product.
Would you say that was a laborious and joyful experience? How would you characterize it in terms of the volume of work you did and what you got out of it on the back end? I guess, would you also say you were proud to see it finally on Amazon?
I would say that initially it was pretty difficult to find out how much work we would need to put in. Originally, we had a larger body of students that were willing to contribute, but considering it was over the summer, it was kind of difficult to communicate. It was also, we were just coming out of a really difficult school year, I think, across the board. So it was kind of difficult to ask people to produce work, even though it was understandable why people were trying to take a break. Eventually, I think we kind of narrowed it down, me and the other co-author, Finley. We started producing more work and kind of molding it into what we thought it would be first. And the product ended up being really exciting, especially to see it on Amazon. And I think in the future, we would definitely like to have more student contributors, since it was really heavily influenced by the co-editors. But I think for the first time around, it was a pretty good product.
Well, I think that's how it ends up being, right? So you're in a group, and invariably somebody, one or two, are going to rise to the top, because not everybody is necessarily willing to put in or have the same work ethic, number one. But I also think when writing a book, right, this is just my 2 cents, but I think it's harder to work with more people because the voice sounds different, right? So like I noticed that when I'm editing papers for the conferences, if we have multiple authors, you can tell where someone's placed a section in versus where someone else is, and someone's always a better writer than there's a weaker writer, and trying to match those voices becomes super hard from an editorial perspective. But I want to go back to your illustrations for a second too, because you talked about how everything was inclusive. And what I loved about your images, right, is that you had a student in a wheelchair, you had, people of different backgrounds and ethnicities. I think your artwork completely embodied the idea of the universality of space as well. How did you come to make those decisions right away? Because I know we didn't tell you that. That was your decision.
Well, thank you for recognizing that. I think that especially for students who are interested in science, it's really important to show that a scientist is not just limited to one group of people. And if you look at the people in the ISS, for example, they come from all different countries, all different walks of life, and they all worked really hard to be in that position. And I think that we should continue to expand that beyond just a certain pipeline of people, and more people who have disabilities or people who are of different races and ethnicities. And I really tried to portray that in the book to show that regardless of who is reading it or who is teaching it, space or art or writing or whatever field, it really applies to everybody.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's fast forward a little bit now to the blogs. So I reached out to you when Presley, my daughter, was kind of so busy with college now. And I have to tell you, the blogs are something that I really wanted to see take place. And it's a way for students to be able to have ownership as well. But it was too much for even me to take on. You took it on with not only a zealousness, which is like super admirable, but like you have more attention to detail in your blogs than I think even I would have been putting in. So tell me a little bit about how you started honing your blogging process. How do you go about listening to the podcast, making your decisions, and then how you do the research, because you do a lot of research to add these great links.
So when I was first approached with the idea of producing these blogs, I thought it was pretty interesting that I could just listen to the podcast and kind of input information, maybe with the topic that kind of reflected on what the podcast talked about. And that would kind of be it. It would just be like small little weekly projects. But as I started getting into it and I started listening to the podcast, I really wanted to personalize it based on what the interviewer said and what the respondent was talking about. So especially in a lot of the interviews, these people are teachers and educators, but they're also scientists, data scientists, biologists, and they have all these different professions that I thought it would be really good to elaborate on these specific professions. And if not, more of what they talked about, so that instead of just listening to the podcast, and if there was one part that someone was confused about, I would try to elaborate on that. So if I felt that maybe one topic needed to be covered more, that's how I kind of based the blogs. And I also included like the information of who is being interviewed, so they could listeners and readers can go back to the podcast.
Right. And I think, that was for me a surprise, because, I was more of an English type, I never saw myself doing any of this either. So at first when I would doing, the podcast with people, I always just assumed, aerospace meant like astronauts, right? Like, oh, you're just going to be an engineer. That's it. But it took a while after working with Mr. Simmons to realize, no, this is an industry where you can apply any of those interests, but yet people don't know all these intricate different jobs or career fields that can exist within it. And I think your blogs do a really good job of bringing out the differences in the kinds of engineers, and the way we can apply things like psychology, or even gosh, I'm thinking not psychology. What was that? Oh, law, which is our most recent one that we did a podcast recently on law in space, right? So jobs that you wouldn't associate, anything we do here on Earth is going to be done in space soon.
I have a question. You're a rising junior or senior? Junior in high school. Do you see yourself maybe in the future being a science writer or a reporter? Is that something that you think is a possibility, or is this the blogging, becoming a blogger, just something that it's really fun right now and you're enjoying it, but maybe that's not your ambitions in the future?
That's a good question. I definitely wouldn't rule out being some sort of science writer in the future, since I really do enjoy it. I would definitely like to explore more of the hands-on sciencey professions as I continue throughout my high school and college careers. But I definitely really do enjoy writing, and I hope that the fields that I do explore have some sort of connection to writing, so I will be able to apply myself in that field.
Well, you can write conference papers too, like what Yasmin and Celine are now doing, right? So we can find your area of interest and get you going in that capacity.
I will drop a little surprise. I'm going to be introducing you to a lady by the name of Kate Tobin. She is like a documentary producer for like Nova and PBS, and she works with a science reporter by the name of Miles O'Brien. And he used to be with CNN, but he is a really well known in those reporting circles, and he does in-depth pieces, right? He won't do the 3-minute, he'll do that 10 or 15-minute story where you really dig deep in a subject. But my goal is to connect you, which we like to do, is connect students with people in fields that you might want to become that, or you might want to meet them and see what that career is like. But I can think of nothing cooler than you connecting with them and somehow you guys working on a project together. That would be as good as it gets, I think, is to see your work on PBS or Nova or the Discovery Channel.
We did talk with Dr. Knowles recently too about the second book in the series. I'm really thinking Artemis, right? I'm thinking the SLS. It seems natural. So we'll talk about that. I think
the backstory of the Artemis is a good one, right? You could even talk about the political winds of change and how we start something, we stop. But eventually we're here. And the Artemis is a great story to tell. Have you spent much time looking into the Artemis program yet?
I have not. I would definitely wanted to do that as we get more information about the possible book, but it's definitely something that's in the back of my mind.
Right. Now, tell us, you're in a new high school this year. Could you share a little bit about the courses that you are really enjoying and what you're looking forward to in your last 2 years of high school?
I want to add on to that too, because now you're at a school that's at a university as well. So if there are any differences that you think you could share with our listeners for those who are going to a traditional high school, that might help too.
Sure. So I attend Florida Atlantic University, which is located in Jupiter. The main campus is located in Boca, and that's a very large campus. But the Jupiter one is really concentrated around science, specifically neuroscience and biochemistry, considering that Max Planck and Scripps are right next to the campus. So it's really easy to get opportunities and experience through those. As a student, I take classes that fulfill both my high school and college degrees. So theoretically, should I stay at FAU, I would be able to complete my first degree 2 years after I would graduate high school. So the credits kind of count for both. And consequently, I take a lot of classes centered towards biology, considering I am a biology major. But I also take classes on data science and calculus and other classes that kind of enrich my experience at the college and help me to narrow down my majors. So I'm really enjoying a lot of those classes. And I find that there's a lot of differences between a traditional high school and kind of a dual enrollment program, especially since you get a lot more freedom in terms of time that you dedicate to classes. But I really do enjoy the structure, and I think it's really beneficial for those that are interested in pursuing a degree sooner than a typical arrangement.
So am I right in that you also do not need to pay tuition? You're accepted in a program that covers your first 2 years of college are basically being covered. That's great.
So imagine you saying you're in calculus as the girl who didn't think she was good at math in middle school, right? Congratulations on that. So you're going to be a biology major. What, for our listeners, would a career in biology or a degree in biology, what are some possible career paths you are thinking about doing with that?
So I chose biology as my major because I think it's extremely interdisciplinary. And if you look at the past podcasts as well, people who talk about biology really express how much you could do in that field. So I decided to
biology, etc.
Yeah. So I decided to choose that field because I feel like I could go into many fields, or I could at least get some experience if I wanted to. So after you get your first degree, you could either, or even while you get your degree, you could participate in research and kind of get more like the wet lab experience. You could also probably do some field work. And I'm doing biology just because I think that it'd be a good pathway should I decide to become either a researcher or decide to go into medical school, since biology has a lot of fundamentals that could kind of.
And also, you mentioned a data science class. There are now these large sets of data that there are biostatisticians, right? There are folks that simply analyze large data sets and work with large sets of numbers. I think it's interesting. You chose a career path. Number one, everything we raise to eat, right? The food between feeding ourselves on the earth and addressing all the problems we've made on the earth, as far as all the types of pollution and the ecological messes we've made.
Well, and just even living in space eventually.
And we think about the Everglades, right? We think about all the issues with GMOs. We think about all the medical research as we deal with these pandemics and different types of infectious disease. It's really a wide open field, right?
Yeah.
So I applaud. Of course, I'm self-serving. Number one, you're one of our great kids. Number two, I'm a biochemist by schooling. So I'm already on your side before you even started, but it's really cool to hear that you haven't given up anything in writing and art. You're just embracing another part, which really makes you a nice whole kid, right? You're not just sitting in front of a laptop 18 hours a day, either writing a story or something. You have a really nice skill set. I think you're developing. It should serve you real well when you get out of school.
Thank you.
I'm going to pivot a little bit to the art now. You've started an art competition that's going to be held at the first SmallSat Education Conference. Do you want to share with us a little bit about what that is and how people can get involved?
Sure. So at the time we're recording this, the deadline is coming up in roughly a month. And there's two different types of contests that are open to both students and educators, depending on which one they decide to enter. The first contest is kind of the more visual art contest, which includes submissions that could be either digital or it could be traditional, like drawing, watercolor, painting, etc. And the main topic of this is to display how you think the future of space will look like. So if you think that we will colonize, if you think that we'll continue to explore space, that should really be portrayed in your piece. And this is open to students in two different age categories, which can be found. It can be found on the AIA Facebook page along with the website. And the second competition we have is the 3D printer competition, which is to design the second annual SmallSat Education Conference logo, in which educators and students can enter. And the prizes for this include a 3D printer, which is alluded to educators, and students will also receive recognition for this. And the visual arts also offers cash as a prize.
So there are two contests. One is kind of what you envision the future of space to look like, and they can choose different kind of mediums. How do they submit those to you? I know that there's a flyer, and of course we'll link the flyer here, but do they upload it to a drive? Or are they sending it in via email?
Yes, so the visual art contest, there's an email that is linked on the flyer. I believe it's cubesatacademy@gmail.com, which you send all your submissions to. And with the 3D art contest, there's a QR code, which is listed on the flyer, which links you to a Google form. And there you could submit your file and further information about your attendance of the SmallSat Education Conference.
Right. And we want to do a shout out for our friends at the AIAA Cape Canaveral section, because they are providing the cash prize for the student. And the educator awardee of this competition is going to win a brand new 3D printer donated by
for the art contest. They get the 3D printer?
No, for the 3D
the logo
logo design.
Oh, okay, the different.
So not only will the educator winning submission, the winner chosen will receive a 3D printer for their classroom. There's a small cash prize, but those are donated by our friends at the, we're in the Palm Beach section of AIAA, and this is our Cape Canaveral friends. They're donating that. And they will 3D print the logo for next year there on site as they announce it. So it's a great opportunity for artists of all types, right? 3D designers. And we do need to upload those STL files because the winning file will be printed on site during the conference. So I want to thank you for organizing it. Between Ms. C and myself and Kevin Johnson of Jacobs Engineering, we've been organizing this conference. And it's very comforting to know that I can trust someone who is not only very good at art, right, in the world of art, but also very responsible. So I'm just, shamelessly thanking you for the good work you've done on you make great flyers and you have great, you really did organize this. So this is sort of this is your baby that you're raising. And I hope it becomes very successful. And I want us to do it every year at our conference. So thank you.
So just to clarify for our listeners, we've thrown about a couple of acronyms. There's the AIA, of course, which is the Aerospace and Innovation Academy. That's our overarching umbrella that provides these. But the AIAA, of course, is the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And that was the group that Kevin was mentioning. So Amanda, as we kind of are closing out today, I think about students who we work with, we work with students mostly in middle school and high school now. We do have some college students, but there are probably students who are just like you, who think that maybe they can't do something because they see themselves one way. What advice would you be giving to some of those younger students out there about maybe opening up their eyes to other possibilities?
So I definitely say to younger students, do not limit yourself just on one field. Obviously, I was very limited to art and writing, which is fine, but I also kind of ignored other fields that I was really, that I really shined in, especially during elementary and middle school. And ultimately, it really just comes down to the effort that you put in. There's opportunities that are abundant anywhere, depending on where you live. And also, there's educators and mentors that are always there for you and will always provide these opportunities should you wish to continue pursuing them. So I think it's really important not to just limit yourself based on something that you're good at, and to also try things that maybe you're not good at, but maybe you would like to continue growing in those fields. And it really just comes down to effort and perseverance.
Yeah,
right. That's great.
So
do you remember placing in the regional science fair in middle school?
Yes, I think that was probably one of my first real science experiences that really shaped how I viewed science and that I was able to progress in that field.
What was your topic?
I tested the speed that Venus flytraps expressed when they consume different types of food. So I compared mealworms and crickets.
That's right. I do remember reading. I do remember. Didn't we practice rehearsing with that? And you're talking about, was it the ones that they grow up in the mountains of North Carolina or South Carolina or something like that?
It's actually in the eastern side where there's nitrogen poor soil.
But at Carolina, am I right?
Yes, North Carolina. They're endangered.
So funny.
You get in trouble for pulling over on the side of the road and stealing them out
but
of the
as
swamp.
a kid, I grew up in Florida, right? I knew they existed, but because you could see them, but they're kind of scary. I would be freaked out if they were in nature.
I'm just curious, did you get your science board back? Do you have your trifold from the regional fair?
I don't think so.
You didn't hang it on your wall?
It was a great project, and I'm always proud of the kids that love what they do, and then they do some good work with it. So.
Well, that brings me to, I guess, just another question. So you could theoretically do the science fair in high school, right? Like even if they don't require it, that might be a good way for you to get started writing some of these conference papers, is to pick an area in biology or one that's being worked on.
So I imagine you're going to have research opportunities at the university that may not line up with the schedule of the science fair, but whatever research that you're doing, Amanda, we will encourage you to write about it, especially if you can find an angle for space, right? I think our theme is whatever you do, be good at it and do something with aerospace.
But she could enter through you, right? Is what I'm getting at. Like, let's say she decided she wanted to do the fair this year. She's going to do a quick biology one. She could enter through you. Is that right?
FAU has a significant workforce dedicated to things like the science fair.
Yeah.
But I'm always glad to speak with you. And if you have any questions, I will help you any way I can. If you needed me to shepherd your paperwork, I would gladly do that. You know, I remember you when you were very reserved and very quiet in class. You were not an ebullient, sort of boisterous, over the top kind of personality, but the quality of work you do is just outstanding. So it's just wonderful to see you finding your happy place. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. And we're so looking forward to seeing what you're going to do in the future.
Thanks, Amanda.